you said that you would match Labour spending plans up to 2010. But by the time, if you do get into power in 2010, there will be a new set of spending plans announced. Will you match them as well?
Well, I don't know what the spending plans are. I'm not matching spending plans just for the sake of it. So I've literally sat here. Let me finish this.
You've said
Andrew,
public spending has to come down. So will you match Labour's new spending plans?
First of all, there are no new spending plans on the table. I have sat in this chair talking to you at the last general election, week after week, saying that the rate of growth of spending was too high and it needed to be reduced. The rate of spending has been reduced out of necessity, not out of conviction, by the government. We believe over the long term the government should grow more slowly than the economy grows, so that in good times you set aside money to prepare for difficult times.
Now, we know you've got a busy day ahead of you. We thank you for joining us. We're going to speak to John McFall now, so if you want to stay for a couple of minutes, you might be interested in what he has to say. Let's go now to John McFall, Labour backbencher. He's also chairman of the Treasury Select Committee. John McFall, inflation up, growth down, unemployment up, sterling down, repossessions up, interest rates probably up. Could you explain what the Prime Minister means when he says our economy is in a better shape to weather the storms than any other?
Well, actually, I think you ask the Prime Minister and get him on your programme, Andrew, to ask that.
He's harder to get than George Osborne.
Well, I'm not here to answer for the Prime Minister, but what I'm here to say to you, Andrew, in light of the letter which the Governor of the Bank sent to the Chancellor today and copied to me this morning, he's saying that we're living in a new world. We're living in a world where, to May this year, wholesale agricultural prices went up 160%. Oil went up 80% and wholesale gas prices went up 160%. And he was very clear in saying that the inflation we have is imported in terms of the fuel, the food prices and the energy prices. And inflation will go to over 4% by the end of the year. And if these stay stable, will then come down. So it's a new world we're living in, Andrew.
Well, it may be a new world, Mr McFall. It's a new world, particularly for the British, because we are the only major economy that's seen our currency collapse in recent months, and that is pushing up in prices. Could you tell us of any other currency that's collapsed by 20% against a basket of currencies in recent months?
Andrew, I'm not going into that with you, and it's dead simple why I'm not going into that, because you had George Osborne on there, and he hasn't answered anything as to what he would be able to do.
Well, you're keeping up his track record, Mr McFall. Why is sterling, why has it been in free fall over the past 6 to 9 months against the euro and other currencies?
Well, sterling has been strong for the past 10 years. In fact, we had experts at our committee this morning. Roger Bootle, for example, said sterling has been too strong over the past 10 years, and we need a readjustment.
It's
and we're
down 20%. What do you say to people who, when they hear the Prime Minister saying how strong this economy is, and they're told, as they were by the chief economist of the Bank of England recently, that sterling has now fallen by more in the past 9 months than it did after it was kicked out the European exchange rate mechanism?
Well, what I would say to people, Andrew, and it's good to have the opportunity here to say it, is that for the next 2 years, we are all going to find this situation difficult. But as the Governor said in his letter to us this morning, does that mean we panic? People's inflation expectations have increased. Do we let the inflation genie out of the bottle? The answer is no. It is going to be difficult for the next 2 years, and we've got to see our way through that. And that just doesn't affect the UK, it affects the whole global economy.
You accept that it's actually... I was looking at factory input prices last week. They went up more in the past 18 months than they've done in the past 20 years. That's still to come through the system. Do you accept this is going to get a lot worse before it gets better?
Yeah, well, I think it could, Andrew, because in many ways in the past 10 years, we've had the emerging economies, the developing economies like China and India, ensuring that the US and the UK consumer was provided with cheaper goods, whether in electricity or other areas. That situation is now changing because in the past number of years, 250 million people have been taken out of poverty in China. They've got more money in their pocket and they're going to spend. What does that mean? There's more demand for commodities. There's more demand for oil. That's the new world, Andrew.
All right, John McFall, thanks. If you can put a word in with your mate, the Prime Minister, to come on, we'll make sure you get the usual 15%.
I'll certainly have a quick word with him.
We knew we could count on you, John McFall. Brian's been very patient here. the two things you wonder about this, you see in the long term, suddenly the phrase stagflation
comes back.
A bit of stagnation, a bit of inflation. You're a historian, you know what that means. And then you think, what does that do to the Labour Party's prospects between now and the election?
Well, I mean, you could begin to see a strategy coming out of number 10. Go back to your core, appeal to those voters who turn out, you know, the over 50s. But who are hit most by this? Fuel, you talked about energy, food prices. The very people who are going to get their free swimming lessons now, and there'll be a whole raft of policies, more policies coming out for them, are the people who are going to be hit hardest if we're in a new inflationary spiral. And I don't see, I mean, I think George was very clear that there aren't any real answers to come.
No, there was no quick reply, was there?
But he's in a great position. He's in the opposition. He just has to let this fall out. One thing Brown had, more than anything else, was this mantle of economic competence.
Yes.
He'd slayed the dragon that Labour couldn't run the economy. All of that now seems to be slipping away. And if they had one chance of winning in the next election, it was that people would go to him in a recession because they would trust that he could make the really tough decisions and pull us through.
Better nurse than something worse.
It's up in the air now. It could still go either way, I think, in terms of that economic competence.
Okay.
But it's that core target audience who are being hit the hardest. And I think you put the you know, you were absolutely right when you said food.
Yes.
It's food where you really feel it.
You can't not buy food, particularly a poor family.
No, exactly.
All right. Good to have you here. We've been having so much fun. We've almost forgotten our quiz.
Yes, a bit later than usual. It's time for the quiz. Our guest today has written a biography of Hugh Gaitskell. So the question is, who succeeded Hugh Gaitskell as